You are listening to the podcast To Be Single or Not to Be by Shaanah Montanna, a podcast where we talk about the single life, dating, and relationships so you can make a decision at the end of each episode and decide to be single or not to be. That is the final question.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the Shaanah Montanna YouTube channel of the To Be Single or Not to Be podcast. And today we are back with another episode of the Running It Back series. And today we are talking about the role of the family. And so when I say that, you may think like the role of the family, like my family doesn't dictate who I date or what I do in my relationships. But in reality, your family and the background of where you come from, where you're going, and the role that they play in your life present day actually should play a role in who you date and how you date. But we're going to get into that in just a moment, but not before doing a couple of housekeeping items. So make sure that you like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, but also be sure to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And next, make sure that you go and follow two of my favorite Instagrams, one which happens to be the SM Journal Collection, which is the new Shaanah Montanna Journal Collection that is out now with volume 1, and also Black Women Healing Together on Instagram, because I am co-hosting along with Shamika Tumblin a new Black Women Healing Together retreat in June of 2024 in Carefree, Arizona, and we want to make sure you are there. So make sure you go and you follow both of those Instagrams so you can start your journal journey and write your way into the life that you desire, but also so you can get some healing this summer on our Black Women Healing Together retreat. So that said, we are going to get right to it. So talking about the role of the family, the reason that I want to talk about this is because when I talked about this episode way back when, like 2020 or 21, I really was of the mindset that the family, like that I come from a family that, you can bring people around, you can tell them who you're dating, and it's not like a big deal. It's not one of those things where like you have to go through my family to get to me. That's how, things used to be. And so where I am now is recognizing, you learn, you grow, you know better and you do better. And so what I am realizing, and I want the world to recognize, is that the way that a person was raised, who their parents are, where they come from, their thoughts around family, their thoughts about life, how they communicate, what are their emotions, just how they operate in the way of the world has so much to do with their upbringing and their family. And it could be still affecting them present day. So you need to be aware of the things that come along with that. So you will know, is this someone that I'm truly compatible with? Because family plays a huge role. And if it's not, I need to be about my father's business and go on my merry way. The first thing I want to talk about is that the family may not play a role in every layer of your dating life, but you should have a high awareness of certain things when it comes to the person who is a potential partner, because we're talking about before we get into a relationship, these are things that you need to be exploring and paying attention to and be wildly intentional about asking questions about, observing when you're in the presence of certain things. But what it really comes down to is paying attention to things like, what was their upbringing like? What was their environment like? Who molded and shaped them as a person? Who do they look up to now, if anyone? What are those relationships like and things of that nature? Because we all know that childhood experiences and family dynamics that you had when you were growing up absolutely play a role in the values and beliefs and the communication style that you have present day. So when I think about breaking it down, we may say, who raised you? Was it wolves? But in reality, and not being funny about it, it's about recognizing, I'll take personally, I was raised primarily by my grandmother until I was about 12 or 13 years old. And so, of course, when a person is not raised by their primary parents, that may play a role in how they operate in life because they were not raised by their primary parent. So you have to recognize, are you dealing with someone that may have some childhood trauma there? Are you dealing with somebody who may not even recognize that they have some trauma there? But more importantly, or just as important, say if the person was not raised by their mom and dad, but were raised by a grandmother or another family member or the foster care system. There's so many layers and places of how a person can be raised. The thing is, how is that affecting them present day? And if their mother and father are around, but they didn't raise them, what is their relationship like with their mother and father? Do they value them? Do they not have a relationship with them? Because that's going to be very telling, especially with men in regards to relationships of women who are dealing with men who do not have a good relationship with their mom and how they view women. Because you cannot convince me that if a man does not have a good relationship with his mom, or if a man hates his mom, um, that he's gonna really have a love for black women. Like, and I'm talking about black women because I date black men. So I have to bring that to your attention where you want to pay attention to stuff like that. Like I saw one time on Instagram, and I don't find this funny, but it was interesting that there were people that were commenting under a post that I put that said that they only date men whose mothers are dead. And they were dead serious. And what they meant by that, because they were having a whole conversation under my post, was that basically they don't deal with men who have mothers that are still around because they are prone to possibly have some kind of mommy issue or some underlying issue that they don't want to deal with. So I'm not going to that extent and giving that advice at all, that we only need to be dating men whose parents are no longer with us. But what I am saying is that you need to be aware that whether that person was raised by their mother and father or their grandparents or an aunt or the foster system, whoever raised them, what is their relationship like with those people who raised them? And do they have any kind of resentment if they were not raised by their mom and dad? Because absolutely you need to pay attention to those things so you can have some indicators of why they feel that way. If there is trauma, are they working through it? Are they healing through it? Are they even aware of it? So you can know if it is going to affect you. And so it's not in a sense to say, oh, you need to run away from said things once you meet a person that may be dealing with something of that nature, but it's still something that you absolutely just need to be highly aware of. And so I think ultimately we live in a world where, some cultures you do have to, definitely get the father's permission before you can ask the woman for their hand in marriage. Or you have certain families that feel like, it's like the show on the OWN network, Family or Fiance, where basically it's a show, if you've never watched it, where two people have come together, they are engaged, and for whatever reason, their families don't think that they should get married. And so they bring them to this house for them to get together, get to know one another, and try to figure out their differences. But it's basically saying that neither of them will marry each other if they don't have the blessing of both people's family. And so you need to know, are you dealing with somebody in that capacity? It may not be where, oh, you have to be able to ask I think traditionally in American culture, most times you do have to ask the dad, but it may be a situation where you may have to ask the father, but you also may have to ask the entire family, is this okay for me to marry this woman? And you need to know, are you dealing with someone like that? Or vice versa, before the man can even get to the point to ask your father or follow those traditions to ask you to marry him, you have to go through your own test and go through the ringer with their family to see if you are good enough to marry them, because we all know that when it comes to mothers and their sons, that sometimes you do have to do miraculous things and jump through many hoops in order to meet the qualifications to be with their sons and and be in a position where they can't even ask you for your hand in marriage. So I think it's so important to pay attention to those family dynamics so that you can just be wildly aware of what it's going to take for you to be in a relationship with this person, knowing the factors that have affected them from childhood to where they are now and what that journey has been like. And that leads me to the next thing. I think something is huge in regards to how a person was raised and what their background is comes down to like communication, because we all know people that, in growing up in their household, either they talk things out, they shut it down, wouldn't talk, didn't have anything to say, go days without talking to one another. Some people may be very emotional. Some people may come from homes where like tears don't mean anything. Some people may be dismissive, avoidant, like I'm just gonna leave the house. Like I'll talk to you when I get back, but I'm not gonna address it right now. So there are so many ways that people communicate, but we all know that most times the way that you communicate has come from the way that you were raised. Because when I think about, and I grew up, I would say, with my grandparents, it was a lot of, spirited conversations that took place. And so I think that the positive thing I took from it was like, I didn't necessarily, not necessarily, I didn't enjoy, sitting through that or like hearing that when they would be having those spirited conversations. So I kind of knew like, I didn't want to take that into the world in general, but definitely not relationships. So I'm one of those people that, in life, sometimes if I experience certain things in a negative way with family, friends, whatever, I kind of take away like, I'm just not going to do that. I don't really adopt or adapt to the bad habit, or yeah, I don't really adopt the bad habit and let that become who I am. So I think in those instances, I think you have to recognize that of course, communication is the most important thing, one of the most important things to lay in a positive and proper foundation when it comes to relationships. But if you're dealing with somebody that your communication styles are just completely different, like they're argumentative, you're not. You like to process things and have a conversation. They like to process things and then ignore you. You're a person that may be emotional, you may cry, but they hate when you cry, so that makes them shut down. Like you have to be aware that while you're not going to be like iRobot and be a mirror image of each other in every way when it comes to communication, I do think that communication is one of those areas where absolutely you want to be more similar than not when you are with somebody in order for you all to kind of get on the same page when it comes to being able to communicate in a healthy and happy way, because communication is one of the foundational things when it comes to having a positive relationship. And if you aren't able to figure out what that's going to look like, what's that going to sound like, then you are going to kind of be moving backwards to the point where you may figure out that this relationship is not the one that you need to be in if you all just cannot get on the same page. Like if you can't verbally communicate in the right way, I really don't see, how you are going to have a successful relationship. So I think it's essential that you're able to recognize, like, when I think about my relationships, I've dealt with people that have been very argumentative. I've dealt with people that wanted me to literally shut up without telling me to shut up, but wanted me to shut up. I've dealt with people that wanted to talk it out, but only wanted to talk it about out to make their point and to make sure that their voice was heard and to make sure that I was going to just follow the rule of their thumb, but not really for me to communicate what I needed myself. So I've talked to a facet of men when it comes to the different styles of communication. None effective, none, zero. You listen to this, oh well, none, zero. But I'll say that what I know now is that when I'm talking to someone, is I pay attention to, are we able to listen to one another? Are we able to listen to the point where we're not just listening so we can say what we have to say, but listening to hear them? Are we able to not yell at each other? Are we able to not curse at each other? Are we able to talk things out, understanding? Because I'm big on this and I think people should pay more attention to it. It's always like when it comes to communication, well, more so if somebody does something wrong, you have to recognize talking something out does not mean that we talk about it tonight. And just because you're over it, that means that's the last time that we got to talk about it. No. And I'm not saying that we have to talk about it for the next 15 years, but I am saying that when it comes to healthy communication, and if we're having conversations about it, we're talking to each other with respect, with kindness, with love, that sometimes it may take where we have a conversation. You may be over it tonight and you're good, but I may need to be at a space like I can sleep on it, but I do want to revisit this tomorrow. And you have to be with somebody that's okay with that, that understanding that the level of understanding and the level of closing a conversation is not going to happen at the exact same time for both of you every single time. So that's going to be a huge part of communication as well, because you're going to have to sometimes compromise. Sometimes you're going to have to negotiate in a good way. Sometimes you're going to have to meet each other in the middle. Sometimes you're going to have to bite the bullet, because that's another part of communication. Are you one of those people that feels like you just say whatever's on your mind because, I'm just being honest, when, yeah, you could be honest, but if you want to have a happy relationship, one of the methods to the madness is not going to be just saying everything that you think. I found that even in some of my worst relationships, then they probably would have been, it's getting worse. It would have got worse if I would have said every damn thing that I thought. So I think when it comes to what I know, when it comes to healthy communication in relationships, that's not the way to go either. Just to say everything that you think, especially, in the heat of the moment. But even if not, it's not always necessary to say everything that comes to mind about every situation. But it is necessary for you to recognize if you are with somebody that you can communicate in a proper way. If you're with somebody that you know, allows you to have a conversation that with them about things that you may be in agreement or disagreement, because it's not always the negative things, but somebody who just respects your voice, respects your opinion. They value what you think and what you say. That's going to be a huge thing as well, because you can have somebody, I previously have dealt with people that, I would say they were good communicators in the sense that they would talk. Like they didn't, look around everybody on mute, but that was it. Beyond the talking, meaning that, they'll have a conversation, they'll have a lot of conversations, but the conversations were never with a positive intent for both of us to win. And ultimately, I want that for everybody, especially for myself, to only really, be in relationship with people that want everybody to win at the end of whatever the situation is. So I think we just have to be hyper aware of that and not feel like, that if we allow our voices to be minimized or we allow ourselves to not be heard, that is, being a good submissive woman or being a good partner just because I decided to just shut up and let them have it. No, like submission gets such a bad rap when like it shouldn't. And that's another conversation for another day. But ultimately, to be a quiet girlfriend or partner or to be a partner that's just never goes against the opposition of whatever it is or just never speaks up for themselves. I've definitely sat in that seat before, and I recognize that when you are sitting there literally swallowing your words, swallowing your pride, swallowing your self-respect, there is no way that you can win in that relationship. And if you are with somebody that wants you to swallow your words, your pride, your respect, swallow who you are and your as your most authentic self, then they're probably a terrorist. No, they're probably somebody that you need to reevaluate if you need to be in a relationship with them, because I just don't see them being somebody that really wants the best for you. And so I want us to just be aware of that. That's one of the most important things when it comes to when we talk about this role of the family and the role that the family plays and what we do every single day. How did the family raise this person to communicate? What did the family teach this person about communicating? What did the family teach this person about women and their communication with men? Did they teach them to respect women? Did they teach them to hear women out? Did they teach them that women are human beings and that we are not to be treated less than? Or did they teach them to treat women like dogs? I mean, well, hell, some animals get treated great. Did they teach them to treat women less than they deserve? Let's just say that. And so it's going to be up to you to decipher and decide how you're being treated and if that's what you want or what you think you're worthy of, because we only get treated as good as we think we deserve. Oh, so that was a lot. Now, the next thing would be, I feel like when it comes to the role of the family and we think about like expectations around relationships, I think that, the family absolutely can get on my goddamn nerves when it comes to their expectations around relationships, because I have a certain family member that loves to talk to me about when I'm gonna have kids and when I'm gonna do this and when I'm gonna do that. When at the end of the day, if I never have children, and y'all know by now, if you've been listening, I don't know if that's what I want, but if I never have kids, if I never do another thing that's considered a success in life from this point forward, I know that I've done enough to be considered successful. So it's not contingent upon what my family thinks or what anybody thinks, but we'll keep it focused on the family. So I think when it comes to expectations and the role of the family, you have to be very careful about allowing your family to influence you to make decisions that you may not want to necessarily make. And not saying you may not want to necessarily make those decisions ever, but you may not want to make those decisions right now. I.e., I think a lot of women, when they get to be 30 plus, parents and family members start to pressure them around having children, which they need to mind their uterus. They start to pressure them around when you get married, when you get married, when you gonna find me a man to get married to. They start to pressure them about all these, I would say, these antiquated dinosaur-esque goals that they used to have back in the 50s and 60s that looked like the American dream. They say, the house, the white picket fence, the dog, and 3 kids, or the 2 kids, the boy and the girl. And, that was it. But I know we live in a completely different society. And while those things are awesome, if you accomplish those and if they're goals of yours or if they are pillars of success for you, that's wonderful. I think those are great things. But I also know that when it comes to the pressures of things that are attached to that idea of children and a husband and relationships, you just have to be leery of moving in a fashion of making decisions to say, I'm going to be with this person or I'm going to marry this person just because there may be that pressure from society, or I see that's what everybody's doing around me. Because, definitely we live in a world, those phones are in our hand, social media technology is in the fabric of what we do. And it can be very easy to look around and say, oh, a lot of my friends are getting married. A lot of my friends are having kids. A lot of my friends are hitting these certain milestones. And I feel like I'm getting left behind. So the next man I meet, if he seemed like he all right and he want to get married, I'm gonna just say yeah, and then I'm just gonna have a baby because that's what everybody else doing. When having a child and getting married is one of the one of the most important decisions that you can make in your life. So why would we play with it? But people do. People, that's the part, people don't say out loud. It's like, yeah, I was fucking around when I decided to have this baby. But nobody's saying that part out loud. So that's the thing. I feel like when it comes to my relationship status and what I choose to do, I've gotten to a place where it's kind of like white noise when people ask me those questions, and I think people are learning, but it's white noise for me because my decision is solely mine. And I think that you have to be able to go into these situations, in those dating situations, knowing like I want to get married, or I want to be in this relation. I want to be in a relationship, but I need to make sure that I'm with the right person. So I'm not going to allow a family member to get in my ear about it and do something that I'm not completely sure I want to do. And I think the other part of it is that you have to figure out what works for you and what can work for you too. Because remember, when it comes to family members, when it comes to society in general, a lot of times when we see these relationships, and you all know, like on social media, when people break up, a lot of times when folks break up, you'll hear a lot of people say and comment, like, y'all look so good together. Like, people get so hung up on the superficial, on the outside looking in, because that's exactly what it is. They don't have a clue that it might have been hell on the inside, or you might have realized that through the process of elimination and conversations and proper communication, that this person just wouldn't be a good fit for me. This would have been a bad partner selection situation if I had signed up for it. So I think that ultimately you have to be able to do the work on your own, separate and apart. And I think when you have the opportunity to, be around family, be around friends, and see what that experience is like of that other person, meaning the other person. Like, I'm around you with your family and friends, and I get to see what that's like. I get to see how they influence you. But at the end of the day, I have to be able to take into account the things that I know personally about you. I have to take into account what my experience of you has been. I have to take into account, what my personal desires are. And we have to figure out, like, is this a good thing for us to, is this a good idea for us to move forward in this? Or is this something that, it was fun while it lasted. It was fun while it was fun. It was good until it wasn't. And you and I need to go our separate ways. But I think that ultimately, when it comes to this part of the role of family, you just have to be able to establish that the two people that are involved, that y'all are going to stay on the same page, but also be sure that you have some kind of boundary implemented, so that if you can help it, family members and friends, don't cross over and do too much too soon, because y'all know how that goes. And that leads me right to the next thing of, addressing that. If you don't have that boundary, if you don't have those things in place, absolutely, your family can be one of the worst influences on your relationship if you allow them. If it's supposed to be you two, and your family always got the third cent to add on to y'all 2 cent, that's going to be a recipe for disaster. So it is imperative that you're able to be in a situation where you understand that you have your own relationship goals, which are within what you are doing, but that you do not allow anything negative that is going on within the family or other dynamics to affect that. Because we know, especially if you come from larger families where you may have siblings or cousins or other family members that are married, or they have children, or they're doing certain things in their life when it comes to familial things, and they're putting that pressure on you, that every time you come around, it's a negative experience, or they have something negative to say. Or if you're the other side of it, is that if you have figured out that you're with somebody that really does not have the red flags, that it is a healthy situation, it's a happy situation, and for whatever reason, y'all know, sometimes you will have people that just like, I just don't like them, I don't know why. Like, you can't allow that to negate your relationship if somebody's coming along, they don't even have a valid reason. Because again, I tell you, I know I got that new rule. If I bring somebody around and y'all feel like it's something crazy happening, they doing something crazy, looking crazy, talking crazy, pull me to the side and tell me you got permission. Because y'all know a lot of times we'll take advice everywhere in our life except when it comes to our nigga. So we got to make sure that when it comes to our nigga, that we okay with saying, okay, sis, you can pull me to the side and tell me this, and we can have a conversation about it and go from there. So I think that ultimately that's another huge thing, is that you and the other person have to ensure that you all are on the same page, that you all have a strong and healthy foundation in order to figure out what it is that you want to go forward with, what this relationship should look like, what this timeline should look like if it does develop into something where you may get married and may have kids or any other things affiliated with that, but doing things based on what you desire and not what anybody else is forcing up on you or telling you to do because they are projecting or trying to vicariously live through you through some things that they never did. Because I recognize that also. Sometimes people will be on your ass about having kids or getting married because they never did it and they still have that dream. And because you may be a person that they love and care about, it's like, I want to see you do it because I feel like if you do it and you are in close proximity to me, that it kind of makes them feel like they did it too. And so you have to be careful of that because it may not be ill intent there. But again, if somebody's trying to live vicariously through you, that's always going to be, a somewhat tricky situation to navigate. So you want to be wildly aware and wildly intentional about that one. And then another thing I think we should always think about is that, it is okay if you do come from two completely different backgrounds. It does not mean that just because your backgrounds are wildly different that you cannot be a healthy and happy couple, that this relationship cannot work out. It's more so about what your life looks like right now. Because, say if you were in a situation where you grew up middle class, they grew up, say, lower class, you were raised in a two-parent home, they were raised by, extended family, you kind of had things, your life kind of went in order. They were kind of all over the place, but you landed in a space where you can meet each other. And as now you're getting to know one another, you're finding that in your adulthood, in your adult life, you have more things in common than not. You're on the same trajectory. When it comes to those pillars that I always talk about, that mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial, you all are on the same page. But you may find that, as they always say, you could take the, what's this, they always say that the saying is like, you could take the person out the hood, but you can't take the hood out of them. So you may take the person out the hood, but they family may still be in the hood and they may still fool with their family. Their family may be still a part of their life, whereas your life does not look like that. But that does not mean that you all cannot work together to come together and be on one accord. So I think that ultimately, you just have to think about those things. You can come from two different worlds if you do the work and if it's supposed to be aligned for you all to be on the same page, but there has to be something that both of you all want. And you have to ensure that you've built a strong enough foundation to be able to work through that. But along with the foundation, a huge part of that is going to just be recognizing, as I mentioned earlier, where was this person's foundation set? How was it set? Who said it? Who was guiding this person? Who's guiding this person now? Who's helping this person? What is their communication like from how they were raised to where they are now? How do they communicate with you? How do they make you feel? And then when it comes to, just the expectations that you both have for the relationship and not allowing the family to come in and intrude on those and tell you what it is or what it should be or what it is going to be. Because at the end of the day, it is your relationship to navigate. It's your relationship to navigate, and only you can navigate it the way that you see fit. So the thing is, the role of the family, it absolutely is there. There is a role when it comes to family and relationships if you have one. You have to be mindful of that. You have to be aware of it. But I want us to just do better with paying attention, with asking questions, being intentional, being engaged, listening to what they tell you, paying attention to what they show you, actually believing it, not ignoring it, and not making sacrifices to ignore it for the sake of a relationship. So you deserve better, but you will not get better until you start acting like you deserve better. So I hope that you all are able to take something with you when it comes to the role of the family, and make sure, of course, that you like and subscribe, as I said earlier. And thank you all so much for tuning in. Signing off, yours truly, Shaanah Montana.